Hello there. This is Anthony, and this is Book Talk at Book Place. And as always, we get to have a guest with us. And today we have a guest who is none other than Sara Schley. And Sara Schley has a book that she's going to share with us known as Brainstorm, From Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum. And Sara Schley is an organization consultant for social and environmental justice, a mom, a stepmom, wife, spiritual teacher, and all those things. And on top of being an author. Welcome to the show, Sara.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, nice to see you. And it's quite a great time that we are going to have here as we are going to learn about your book that is just to come out. And let's get to know you first before we even go into the book. Who is Sara?
Wow. Well, you mentioned in the beginning many things at this point. Huh? I mean, I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is mother, wife, grandmother, all those things.
Oh.
And I've also been, as you mentioned, my profession has been a corporate consultant for about 30 years, working with companies like Nike and Shell and British Petroleum and World Bank, and more recently, smaller companies, Eileen Fisher, around environmental and social justice. And I've written some books on that. And that's been my professional pursuit, systems thinking approach to healing the planet.
Oh, okay. So Brainstorm is not your very first book.
It's not my first book. No, I've written books in other genres, let's say. Yeah, one's co-authored on sustainability. Another is called Secrets of the Seventh Day, which is actually about the practice of Sabbath, of unplugging for a day. And so that you might say is kind of in the spiritual domain. This is the first book that I'm writing, that I've written about my experience with bipolar over 4 decades.
Oh, okay. Let's dive into it. So what's your experience with bipolar? I mean, how did it all get started?
Okay. Well, for me, I was, as I write in the book, I was blessed to be a kid with, athlete, scholar, Ivy League school, pre-med, just kind of cooking along in my early 20s. And then right just around my 21st birthday, I had a tremendous breakdown. I had my first, I learned, close to 30 years later, my first bipolar flare, you might say. And I had the experience of a brain crash, and it was absolutely terrifying. I went from, being able to do physics and calculus and whatever else in those domains to like barely being able to add 2 + 2. It was excruciating because I didn't know what was happening, to me, to my brain, to this experience. That said, I do come from a family with depression, where my mother had depression, my grandfather had depression. So I had some inkling, I had some experience with that, certainly significant experience with that, but I didn't know what was going on for me.
Oh. And if I may ask, for someone out there who may not have an idea, the slightest idea of what bipolar is, you kind of mentioned something to do with brain crash, and what could be the trigger? How is it? What brings it about?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure that anyone really knows exactly what brings it about, Anthony. I mean, in the book, I say that the brain is as vast as the universe and equally uncharted. In my case, when we found out 30 years later that I had a bipolar brain, I learned that for my particular kind of brain, the first incident is often in the early 20s. Okay. So it's not surprising that I had my first crash at age 21. Later you could look at stressors being a factor, a certain intensity of life going at a certain, pace that might be a factor. But really it's hard to know, because I have a genetic predisposition, having come down from my mom and my grandpa, and who knows before that, and towards this chemical imbalance. But it also is influenced by external factors of stressors in your life. Okay. So, yeah.
And I mean, you talk about it being diagnosed, if I got it right, 30 years later. That's when you come to, I mean, they identify that you had it some 30 years before?
Yeah, it was actually 25,
25,
almost exactly. I said 30 just now, but it's 25.
Okay.
So this is partly why I wrote the book, because it says in the subtitle, From Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between sort of classic manic depressive, which is known as bipolar Roman numeral 1, which is very easy to diagnose. I don't know how easy, but basically someone who's a patient will present as having had huge highs, big swings. So, sort of the classic stereotype, but in reality of shopping sprees or sex sprees or money sprees or, staying up all night long, sort of mania, followed by a tremendous crash and a kind of depression where you can't get out of bed and you can't add 2 + 2 and it's overwhelming to sort the laundry. And there's suicidal ideation and sometimes worse.
Okay.
So that's sort of the classic bipolar 1 over here on the spectrum.
Yeah.
But then I've learned, over many years since, is that there are lots of variations of that going all the way from bipolar 1 down to what you might call unipolar over here, which is just straight depression. You don't see any kind of flares up and down. You don't see the mania. In my case with bipolar 2, Roman numeral 2, which is on the spectrum, what the patient in my case presents as when you walk into a therapist or counselor, psychiatrist, you present as excruciatingly depressed, severe depression, but they don't see any high. So they assume that you have just regular, quote, straight clinical depression. But the problem is that you're actually bipolar, but it's sort of invisible. And it takes a more nuanced diagnosis for a doctor who knows to look for bipolar spectrum to figure out that that's what you have, what I had. And that doctor I came across 25 years later.
Whoa, okay.
So he was able to diagnose me in 15 minutes with the right questions, but it was because he had a particular lens to be aware that there was even such a thing as bipolar 2. Okay. So when I ask people now, how many of you have heard of a bipolar spectrum? No hands go up. Did you know? I didn't know. I had bipolar in my family. Have you ever heard of a bipolar spectrum?
No, I'm hearing it for the first time.
Right. So this is really why I wrote the book. I wrote the book not to tell my story, but to save lives, because having that distinction, the correct diagnosis, therefore getting the right medicine, can make all the difference. Yeah.
Okay. And what is it to live with bipolar, even not being diagnosed, for these 25 years? What was life like as you're going through?
Yeah. And, everyone's different. So I don't want to prescribe a particular, scenario that's true for everyone. But for me, what it's like is that when I'm well, when I'm healthy, I am high energy, productive, effective, writing books, having kids, being a corporate consultant, being married, having lots of friends, I have a lot going on in my life. You might say high energy. And then when the depression hits, which before I was diagnosed and before I took any medicine, it could be anywhere from every 6 months to, in one case, 10 years that I went without it. But in my 20s, it was 6 months on, 6 months off, 6 months on, 6 months off.
Okay.
And when I say the 6 months on, when I was in a severe depression, it's excruciating. And I think I have to read the book because there it takes me 200 pages to describe it. But it's for someone who hasn't been through this, I think it's hard to imagine. For someone who has been through it, they'll go, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And, for me, it is hard to get out of bed, hard to do any mental processing. Like I said, even doing the dishes or folding laundry becomes overwhelming. There was one time where I went shopping. It took me literally 3 hours to unpack 2 bags of groceries. Literally, if you can imagine that, because my brain can't process it. Yeah. At the same time, I am just not capable and competent. I have little kids and I really don't know how to feed them. And it's, thank God, we had other adults in our lives that could fill in at that point. Flat affect, inability to feel joy. And it's just like being in a prison in your brain for hour upon hour upon hour upon hour for days and weeks and months. So it's brutal. I describe it as to hell and back.
Oh. And that must have been a tough time going through, that you didn't even know what you're going through.
Right.
And
you
not
don't know
only,
when it's going to end.
yeah,
And when
you
you're in
don't
it,
know
you
when
believe
it's
it's
gonna
never going to
end.
end. Yeah.
And the other thing is that those around you don't have a clue what is happening to you. They don't know how to react. That's what I am guessing. And
I mean, they like, my family, because I said my mother had experienced this and my grandfather had experienced this, there was awareness and knowledge of what it was like to go through the depression part of it.
okay.
But still no one knows what to do, because no matter what you offer, it's not going to be enough. I mean, later and in the book, I talk about what I learned from the doctors that I'm working with now, who are sort of on the forefront of clinical research and teaching on the bipolar spectrum at University of Pittsburgh and Stanford and other places. They talk about 4 dimensions that are essential to address all 4 in, a therapeutic approach. So 1 is medication, 2 is therapy, 3 is support network, and then 4 are what I started calling practices for healthy brain, which are like diet and exercise and meditation and all the things that you might do to stay stable. So it's all those things combined. It's a big piece of work, but it's doable.
Yeah, and now since you have you can articulate to the levels that you've been through and what you've experienced, and I want to imagine that your awareness is on a high level, coming even to the level of writing a book. Yeah. I just wonder, what was your lowest that you were, I mean, apart from the ones that you've described that you had to take quite a long time to unpack your shopping, are there levels that you've been down to an extent that you can't even know yourself? I mean, you go somewhere that you can't find your way back home.
Yeah. It feels like you're in, you're like, you're in a dark underworld. I don't literally believe in hell, but metaphorically, it feels like that. And it feels like there's no escape. Once my first time in my 20s, I remember drawing a picture and, stick figure where there's a little person at the bottom of a valley and all these huge mountains and there's no way out.
Yeah.
Or I would describe it as, drowning and no way out. And it feels relentless, like it's never going to end. And yeah, so it's pretty terrifying. I mean, I never did anything to hurt myself in terms of, like a suicide. I know some people have. I understand where that comes from. I don't judge it. I know where it comes from. I know that level of pain. I would dream about it because you just want to get out of this, you're in a vice in your brain and you just want to get out of it. But luckily for me, I just couldn't leave my kids that way. So I had this, I'll stay in hell in eternity rather than give my children a legacy, heaven forbid, of a mother who took her own life. So I hung in there, thank God, because right now things are good.
Okay, good.
Things are great.
Now, Brainstorm comes out in a short while, in a few weeks, I guess.
Yeah.
And how did you land on the word? I mean, the title, Brainstorm.
How did I land on the title?
Yeah, instead of any other name, they're out.
The title just came to me once, and it's like, if you wrote it as one word, it's Brainstorm with a capital S. Yeah. On the cover, which was shown in a minute, the designer wrote it a little bit differently, but it's supposed to be a play on words, that like I have a brainstorm when I'm well, I've got ideas going all over the place, tons of ideas. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm starting businesses, and then the play on words being brainstorm, like there's a storm inside your head, lightning bolts.
Well, okay.
And then the subtitle, From Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum, is important because I want to show that there's a trajectory, because I do feel blessed in my life now, very blessed. And the bipolar spectrum piece to help people begin to have an awareness that this exists. And what does that mean? And let's inquire into it and let's learn more about it.
Yeah. And now in the healing, because is there a healing, a complete healing that you know of that is recorded, or someone lives with it for the rest of his life or her life?
I think the way I think of it, Anthony, is I live with it for the rest of my life.
Okay.
I have a healthy respect for my bipolar brain. It's not like, you know, heaven forbid you have cancer, you go into remission, it can actually be gone, or, you know, or you get COVID and you heal it and it's gone. I don't think of it as gone, but the way I am right now, and knock wood, you know, and please God or whoever else you pray to, my treatment is pitch perfect. It works. So I don't feel any side effects or anything from my bipolar brain right now. I'm very lucky because I have the medication I take I don't have side effects from it. So I don't experience any issue with it. But if I said, oh, I feel great, I'm going to stop my medicine, I know I would tank. So I always know it's with me. And my husband did have a cancer diagnosis, and thank God he's doing well. And he says he does always look over his shoulder, you know, is it coming back? And I look over my shoulder, and what it does is it makes me uber dedicated to my practices for a healthy brain. Like I am disciplined. And one of my friends says, you're my North Star on self-care. And I tell her, you know why? Because I know what's at risk on the other side of this. So, you know, I'm exercise, diet, affirmations, prayer, unplugging for the 7th day, making sure I get enough sleep. It's on and on and on. But the side effect of that is I'm probably the healthiest 60-year-old gal you're ever going to meet.
And you mentioned something important there. With a lot of people that I come across, that just by the fact that today I'm breathing, that I am healthy, that I can walk, not get tired, just because I'm seeing 5 miles from where I am, doesn't mean that I live carelessly. That I have to take care of my body, I have to exercise, I have to take the right diet. And it's important. It's not by just the fact that you are expecting something behind your back to come after you, but you have to maintain a healthy lifestyle all through.
Exactly. I mean, that's why in the book I call it Practices for Healthy Brain, because it can work for anybody. You don't have to have what I have for these practices to be helpful in our modern society where there's so much stress. You know, so yeah, exactly. So we all have to do that. And I think mine's just amped up because I know the risks if I don't. And that's it's a good teacher, you know, in that respect.
And let me ask you this question. Do you have kind of an association that you are, I mean, I know we have other issues, other conditions with people, and they have associations where they come together and share ideas, they share tools that are working. Is there something that you are in that is helping you to cope with it, and that you can advise people to go to if they have a case in their family? Or that's such
a great question. I am not presently involved in something like that. Because I'm not, I don't have an active, what I call flare, you know, or I'm not in an active bipolar challenge at this moment. So I personally don't have that. I've been doing it for 30 years. So I have, you know, my practices are pretty wired, you know, I'm up, I stretch, I pray, I get exercise, I make a good, you know, it's pretty hardwired right now. But I do know that, and in the book, I put these resources in there. There's one resource in particular for if listeners are concerned or interested or in need of help. It's called psycheducation.org. So psych like psychology, PSYCH education.org. And that was hosted by a guy called Dr. James Phelps, who's one of the leading thinkers on the planet around the bipolar spectrum. And it's very practical. He's just got all kinds of tools and methods that are very accessible for, you know, working with this condition. You know, for example, who knew about dark therapy? At night, you need to have no light at all. Like the little lights from your cell phone, you know, our little blinking guys. It's not good for your pineal gland, I think it is, or pituitary gland. So you have to shut all that down. So I sleep with a silk eye mask. He's got very practical stuff like that, as well as a lot of descriptions and you know, more scientific explanation of what's happening there. And then there's another organization called DBSA.org. DBSA stands for Depression Bipolar Support Alliance, DBSA. And I'm not sure where listeners are. I know that in the States, they have chapters all over the country, and it's designed to be a peer-to-peer support group. I think kind of like AA it might be, but with a lot of resources there as well. And then, if people come to my website eventually, after the book is out, I may be giving webinars, podcasts, that kind of stuff as well to offer ideas to people. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. So there's no way that I can give medical advice, but, just more ideas about the healthy practices for living a good, strong, healthy life.
And that would be good of you when you be
Yeah.
there for others who are going through what you've been, because there's one good thing with someone who's been somewhere, you can always guide someone out of it because you know you have the experience. So that would be good of you when the book is out and people are reading it to have a resource for them to come to in order that they can get help.
Yeah, I have a very personal story on that. Can I, if we have time?
Anthony? Sure. Go ahead.
My son, I have twins who are now close to 20, hard to believe. And my son last year, at the beginning of COVID, he was going off to college. He was 18. And just before he left, he read my book cover to cover, which is shocking for a teenager to read anyway.
Yeah.
But, it's his mother's story. And he, and about a month into school, he said, "Mom, can you send me your book? I think my new best friend might have what you have." So I was very moved by that, of course, and I sent it to him overnight. And long story short, this young man, he and I become friends, and he was very interested in the book. On page 37, on page 102, he said, here's a big, strong fraternity guy. And he said, "I was crying by page 3 for the first time someone understood what it's like inside my brain."
Oh.
And that's exactly who I'm writing it for. And now he's doing great. So I'm really thrilled, and my fingers crossed he continues to do great. Because my 20s were rough, but there were some practices in the book and some approaches that have really helped. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. And just as you said, you're writing this book not to tell your story, but to save lives.
Yeah.
And that is very good of you. And one thing I would maybe ask is now, as we are almost done, to give us a perspective, a whole perspective of what the book contains. I mean, in short, in brief, something that the reader is going to expect once he buys this book.
Okay, thank you.
That is going to help this save the lives that we are going to save.
Yeah, well, I wrote it as a story, as a memoir, so it's very accessible. And also because I wanted, like this young man, people to get that they are not alone if they have this kind of brain, or if they one of their loved ones does, they can recognize it. So it's written as a story, very accessible. People say page turner, but in it, there's kind of its purpose is 3 things: save lives, end the stigma, and reduce suffering. Yeah. And the reduced suffering part is that people are going to start to understand this distinction about bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 and the bipolar spectrum. So they may actually have they're going to be armed with some tools then to help them understand that, and maybe go to a therapist and to inquire, have you thought about this? Because, for example, one of my therapists said, "You have to write this because my colleagues don't know." So get those distinctions. And then in the end, that's part 1. And it ends on redemption because I'm doing well, thank God, right? So it goes from broken to blessed, there's hope. And then part 2, because some people said to me, kind of like you have, could you give us more tools and techniques for practical implementation? So part 2 says, okay, now what? Now if you think that you or a loved one might have a brain like this, what can you do? And there I get into various practices. I call them PECs, acronym for physical, emotional, creative, and spiritual. I put all the resources in the book. So it can be, there's some practical, things you can do Monday morning as soon as you finish the book. Hopefully that can help.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's it. I hope you read it.
That's wonderful. And we are looking forward to reading it. And now, because it's not out yet, how shall I know when it's just about to come out so that me and my viewers can get a purchase of it.
Yeah, I hope you will.
Yeah.
Anthony, can I share my screen?
Go ahead.
I want to show
Go
the
ahead.
picture.
Go ahead.
Okay, so are you seeing now a picture of the book?
Yes.
So here it is. And you can see the butterfly. You can see it says my name and Brainstorm from Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum. There's a quote from Dr. Holly Schwartz, masterful, poignant, inspirational. She wrote me a beautiful testimonial. She's one of the leading thinkers and researchers on the bipolar spectrum. And then I wish and hope that you will go to that link.
Yeah.
You can sign up with your name and email and be the first to know that the book is published, which is going to be in December. Very exciting.
Okay.
And then we'll send a blast that day when it goes out, and you'll know, and you can order it right that day. So this is, and I'm loving the cover. It's just hot off the press because it really kind of describes what it is that I was hoping to capture in the theme.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So all the viewers, all those who are listening to this, go to saraschley.com and go to the Sara's Books tab, and that's where you'll find a place where you can sign up to be notified of the book once it's coming out. Brainstorm, from broken to blessed with the bipolar, on the bipolar spectrum. Forgive me. And
Anthony, can I just say, because my name is hard to pronounce or spell, because all I have to go is saraschley.com, and my first name is S-A-R-A, last name S-C-H-L-E-Y. So it's Sara, S-A-R-A, S-C-H-L-E-Y.com. And then you can sign up, get the book. I'll be so happy.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And it's a beautiful book, and we'll be waiting to see it and read it and know much more about the bipolar spectrum, and not only that, but how to deal with issues when we come across them that touch on bipolar.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we very highly thank you for taking your time and getting us to know about this issue, because for some of us, it's the first time that we are hearing of it, and we might have come across situations that we may not have understood. And just like you lived for 25 years without being diagnosed, someone out there could be undergoing that phase, and this is going to be a great help to them.
Amen. May it be so. I'm hoping that it'll be 25 days instead of 25 years for that person, or even 25 hours.
Yeah. So once again, thank you. We appreciate you, and have a great time. And to the viewers, thank you very much for watching this. And remember to share it with a friend. Sharing is caring. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anthony. So appreciate you.
Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye.